Greetings, hello, vedui, and vemu. I am Alex, also known as Solanus Dracone, and this is the inaugural episode of a series I am going to call All Things Lord of the Rings. Most of the people on the planet will only be familiar with the happenings of the Third Age, specifically the goings-on of the Fellowship of the Ring. What the vast majority of people are not aware of is what happened before all that. The universe of J.R.R. Tolkien's signature series has an extremely deep history, with lore all the way back to the literal beginning of time and the universe. Most of this stuff is covered in the single-volume collective known as the Silmarillion. Or Silmarillion, I'm not so sure about the pronunciation. Anyways, rather than being a single book with a single story as we would know it, the Silmarillion details the happenings of the First and Second Ages, and even earlier than that. For this reason, it is divided into multiple smaller book chapters. Today, I will be talking about the first section of the Silmarillion, what I like to call Age Zero, the Ainulindale. I should note before we get much further that all of the information I am discussing in this video, and indeed in any subsequent videos I make after this, provided this one does well, is information that is hotly debated within the Tolkien community. I may pronounce words differently than some others do, I may get exact facts differently from others, and I may miss out on a detail which I don't find important, but other people might think changes everything. I'm not trying to be the definitive source for Lord of the Rings information, but what I am trying to do is give as clear an image of the events leading up to the famous journey of the Nine from Rivendell as is possible for me to do. All that being said, let's dive right in. Age Zero Ainulindale. In the beginning, there was Eru, also known as Iluvatar, most often just called Eru Iluvatar, loosely translated as the One Father of All. Eru, for lack of any better analogy, is God, sole possessor of the flame imperishable, that which grants life and sentience to all living beings. At this time, there was no physical universe, there was only the consciousness of Eru, and then he put his plans into motion. The first act Eru undertook was to create the Ainur, plural form of Ainu. The Ainur were, again, for lack of a better description, his angels. As there was no such thing as a physical universe at this point still, Eru and his Ainur all existed as pure consciousness, their communications like songs sung through the ether to each other. And songs they were, for as the title of this section says, this is the Ainulindale, music of the Ainur. At first, Eru allowed the Ainur to discover their own tones, their own harmonies. He wanted them to learn their voices and the roles they would play in the great symphonic composition he had planned for them to make. Many of the Ainur had stronger voices than the others, and thusly many gathered around these powerful voices. One voice in particular was very loud and very willful indeed, the voice of Melkor. After Eru felt that the Ainur had discovered their voices and arranged themselves into a proper orchestra, he set forth the decree. The Ainur would give form to the music. They would shape it, but they had to follow his theme. Eru set forth 3 separate themes, one after another, and allowed his angels to weave the musical tapestry. These compositions would become the blueprint for what was to come. Each time, the Ainur would weave together a beautiful song with the theme Eru had given to them, but each time, Melkor, the most powerful of the Ainur, would try to interfere with the song. He would introduce his own discordant tones. For Melkor alone of all the Ainur wished to match Eru, to be able to put his own stamp on things, to stand out above all the others. Each time Melkor's interference influenced the way that all the other Ainur sang, causing them to have to change their own tones to be able to match, or speak above, Melkor's discord. Some of the lesser Ainur even began to sing along with Melkor and match his tune. This would prove to become very significant. Unfortunately, there were no do-overs. Eru set this assignment out for them, and had promised them beforehand that what was sung would be what came to be. He couldn't very well go back on his word, although he did have a stern word or two to say to Melkor. Mainly, that as much as Melkor wished to create his own story, his own symphony, that all the creativity showed was still part of Eru's plan, that the theme would remain unchanged, and that in the end, because Melkor did not possess the flame imperishable, which only Eru possessed, that he would never know true control over the destiny of the universe. And then, Eru said a single word, Ea, let it be so. With that, the physical universe blazed into existence, and the Ainur saw that the music they composed under Eru's guidance had taken form into a world, a beautiful world, which was to be called Arda. The Ainur were thrilled, they were ecstatic to go and play in this world that they had created, to explore the existence which they had helped to bring about. But Eru was a stern parent with a definite agenda. While Arda existed, it was without true form. The material was there, but none of it was arranged. It was like a disassembled Lego set. Eru said that though they had sung the blueprints for the world which was to be, they still had to go and physically make that world, to shape it as it had been sung. This begins what I like to call Age 0.5. Eru named the 14 most powerful of his Ainur as Valar, those who would take actual physical form and be in charge of the shaping of the world. Unfortunately, Melkor was left out of the party. Because he was still so willful, he set into Arda with the sole intent to bully and stymie the works of the Valar. The discord which he had sown into the Ainulindale was fated to occur, and Melkor was more than happy to make it so. I'm not going to attempt to explain in exquisite detail all that went on in Age 0.5, as that would be a very long monologue. Suffice it to say, it consisted mostly of the Valar making something cool, and Melkor coming to screw with their day. Everything they made, he came and stomped all over like a bully in the playground. Eventually, they managed to shun him from the playground for the most part, but he went to the far east and claimed his own slice of territory to do with as he wished. He created a fortress on the far eastern edge of the world, Utumno, also known as Udun, which should sound vaguely familiar for those who remember Gandalf's badass speech to the Balrog. We're getting near the end of what's relevant, but I will say that the goal of the Valar was to create a place of beauty and wonder, to be able to greet that which Eru had said must be sewn into the story of their song, the theme which Ilúvatar had set forth. The coming of the first and second born, the elves and men. Their priorities were simple. 1, they would set up a beautiful place filled with serenity and tranquility in life, and 2, they would have light by which to view all this beauty and splendor. Their first base was called Almaren, and it was in an island on the middle of Arda. The lights that they had set up were called Ormal and Iluin. These were massive lamps set up at the north and south extreme ends of the world. I should note that at this time the world was literally flat. I'll get into that in a future video. Naturally, Melkor didn't like this, and he smashed the lamps down, which destroyed Almaren and a lot of the world as well. Rather than destroy, I should say, it wrecked them. Seas were shifted, lands broke apart, it was literally a hot mess. Their second try, however, stuck. The Valar set up a second base of operations, this time on the extreme western edge of the world, as far from Melkor and his crap as possible. This land was called Aman, and the capital of Aman was called Valinor. There, the Valar raised 2 mighty trees, Laurelin and Telperion, respectively the tree of the moon and the tree of the sun. From these trees radiated the light which covered the beauty of what the Valar had managed to create. The trees each shine their light in cycles, so that when one tree began to wane, the other would be firing up, and the land of Aman would be bathed half the time in golden light and half the time in a silver light. This signaled the beginning of the First Age, and that is where we will end this video. Now, depending on how well the view count on this video does, our next video will begin to scratch the surface of the events in the First Age, when the births of the elves and men came about, and a story so epic that it makes the quest to destroy the One Ring seem trifling unfolds. Thank you so very much for watching and listening. I want to point out, this is kind of an experimental video. I want to see if it does well before making any more. If you've stuck around this long, that means you must have liked it. Please let me know in the comments, and with those likes and subs, that you do, and I will have the heart to make more. Once again, I am Alex, also known as Solanus Dracone, and this has been All Things Lord of the Rings. Goodbye!